Hey there, Bear Club! At the Mama Bear Initiative, we explore how to protect ourselves so we can protect our cubs, the people who depend on us. Join us and get the confidence you need to stay safe, make good choices, and protect yourself and those you care about. Let's go!
Hello, and welcome back to the Mama Bear Initiative podcast. I'm Stephanie Dunham.
I'm Evelyn Mason.
I'm Rochelle Knapp.
I'd like to thank you for joining us in this episode today. We are going to be talking about intention. The opposite of intention is passivity, so we're going to talk about that, why it's a problem. We're going to talk about what intention is and how to be intentional. Of course, we're following our three bullet point progress or process.
Right?
I feel like we're doing a sermon or something. Anyway, so Rochelle brought this up at the end of our martial arts class today because I was talking as sensei about why you're doing what you're doing. Because if you're not intentional about it, or there's no reason for doing it other than maybe a spiritual or philosophical reason, then you're basically just doing a dance. If you're doing it because you want to be proficient at self-defense, you have to put more into it,
Right.
which is intention.
Right.
In fact, if you've been in any martial arts training at all, you might have heard somebody talk about intention. So let's define it. What is intention? Just a general sense. We'll go over the various aspects of it. But when I say in a self-defense context, intention, what do I mean?
I think of basically a plan of action based on my values.
Okay, so it's something you're going to do.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to why you're going to do it in a little bit.
Yeah. Sort of I intend to do, so I'm planning to do thus and such. Yeah.
Right. So the opposite of intention, believe it or not, is passivity. What is passivity, Rochelle?
Passivity is letting things happen without any thought, any sort of boundary, just letting sort of people walk all over you. And essentially what it boils down to is things happen and you react. You don't have a plan ahead of time of how to handle a situation. You just react to it.
Or you don't react.
Mm-hmm.
You just let things happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you may or may not get caught up in whatever's going on, but either way, you're just not doing anything about it.
Yeah.
I think that happens a lot in this world.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are very passive for a lot of different reasons. Anyway, so let's talk about the problem of passivity. Let's start with denial. What are we talking about when we mean denial?
I picture like la 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 la, fingers in the ears, everything's fine. Everything's fine. Nothing bad is happening. Kind of like living in our own little world where you can see, I see maybe something's coming. No, that can't be true. It must be this because nothing bad is happening.
Right. So it's sort of like there's a snake in front of you that could bite you, inject you with venom, and you're just pretending it's not there.
Pretty much.
You're just like, there's no snake there. Or it's fine, it won't bother me.
Yeah, it's not poisonous. I don't know what that rattling sound is, but it's not poisonous. It's okay. It's just a garter snake.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, denial is, like you said, essentially just pretending something's not happening, pretending something's not true, pretending something's not there, or something bad's not going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
I've not done a study as to why people don't intentionally get into self-defense training for themselves, but I think, denying that anything bad could happen to them is a reason.
Yeah.
Nothing bad has happened so far, so nothing bad will. Which reminds me of a video I came across of a woman who apparently worked for something like Subway or something like that. And she made a sandwich for a man, and apparently the man wanted more ham or something. and they were going back and forth about it, and he reached out and punched her in the eye
Mm.
and hit her a couple of times before another customer jumped
Wow.
on his back
Wow.
to pull him off of her. And, it's like just out of the blue over him, but just out of
Yeah.
the blue. It's not something you expect to happen. And pretending like something like that couldn't happen is really not a helpful way to live.
No, you're basically lying to yourself
Right.
and setting yourself up for if something bad really does happen,
right.
because reality doesn't care.
Yeah, reality doesn't care about your feelings.
Nope.
Your beliefs.
I feel like I'm quoting someone.
yeah. I think it's Ben Shapiro, actually. But yeah, reality is reality. So at whatever level I'm not aligning myself to reality, I'm basically putting myself in danger.
Right.
So
Right.
yikes.
So another form or another problem that comes with passivity is passing the buck. I think there was something brought up or studied or whatever about people in cities like New York City who saw someone harming someone else, committing a crime, and they just kept walking. And they didn't involve themselves in what was going on. So someone could be beating a woman outside of an apartment building, and everybody in the apartment building would hear it and maybe even see it, but then they wouldn't call the police, they wouldn't get involved. They're basically passing the buck,
Right.
hoping some hero would come along and stop the crime.
Yeah.
Right. I think they call that bystander. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't think of the term either. But that whole idea of, well, somebody else will take care of it. There's so many people around. Surely somebody will step in. Or even the whole idea of, well, it's not my problem. Or even that whole spectator mentality where you're just kind of watching, or people whip out their phones.
Yeah. They're calling it the Google.
The Google
is calling it the bystander
That's
effect.
how we know it's Steph talking, by the way.
Yeah.
In case you had any doubt.
If I put the in front of something that doesn't get a the, that's how you know it's me. So it's either the bystander effect or the bystander syndrome. So that's, just not being willing to step in, passing the buck. Or maybe it's something going on in your home. Maybe you'll hope your spouse will take care of it. Or if you're a kid, maybe you're hoping your brother will take care of it or whatever. And you're not willing to do it yourself.
Or even the whole idea of, well, maybe it'll resolve itself. Which, is not
It's
generally
a kind of passing the
case.
buck.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Passing the buck to an imaginary person.
Right. Or to time.
Or to time. Oh, yeah, that's a good one. To time. Yeah, so, and we know, things, I think it's pretty obvious that things don't really resolve on their own unless somebody's willing to do something about it.
It's true.
Yeah.
I was recently thinking about this because I came across a meme on the internets that said that time heals, but I haven't found that to be true.
Right.
Time doesn't heal unless you're willing to do something about the problem. Time by itself isn't enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Because things just sit in your memory as they were from when they happened.
Right.
So unless I'm willing to take action, it's just going to sit there.
Yeah.
Right. So the idea that time can be a benefit if you're doing something over time, as you're addressing it day by day over time, you can really have some healing. But otherwise, what are you doing? You know?
Right.
I've always been an advocate for, I think we all are actively advocating for people to deal with their trauma, which is a pretty deep and different subject. But passivity can play a role there, like you're saying. Talking about denial, talking about pretending like it doesn't exist isn't going to change anything. It's not going to take it away. It's not going to evaporate out of your mind. It's affecting you in many profound ways, and you have to do something about it. You can't be passive about dealing with your trauma.
Right.
Yeah.
We're dealing with what's going on around you, which brings me to, I'm going to talk about the last 2 points kind of together because they're both basically what you were talking about, which is living in a fantasy and avoidance of responsibility. So when you're living in a fantasy, you're basically saying to yourself, "Oh, everything's fine. I'm fine. You're fine. Everything's fine. I'm okay. You're okay." Wasn't that a book in the 70s that was popular?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm okay. You're okay.
I don't buy that one either.
No, no, we're not. You're not. I'm
Nobody's
not.
okay.
The situation isn't either.
Yeah. And if
It's
you're
not
in,
okay.
yeah, and if you're in this something where there's something happening that's unethical or abusive or whatever in, let's say, your workplace,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just letting it happen and you know better,
Mm,
that's on you.
Right.
yeah.
Living in a fantasy of pretending everything's fine isn't really doing any good for anyone.
Mm-mm.
Right. Or even making excuses for it. Oh, she's just having a bad day. Or, well, he's not normally like that.
Yeah,
Right.
which harkens back to the idea of watching for patterns.
Yeah.
Right.
Once or twice, if somebody acts out a character once or twice, that may or may not be a sign
Right.
that there's a problem. But if it happens over long periods of time, again and again, that's usually a sign that something's not right and
Yeah.
something needs to change.
Yeah.
Yeah. So avoidance of responsibility is going back to the denial, the passing the buck, the living in a fantasy. The whole point of that is to avoid doing anything. What are reasons why people don't want to act?
Mostly fear, honestly. I think it's all based in fear. It's all based, I think, especially like the bystander syndrome, everybody's afraid to stand out and risk getting themselves hurt by whatever's going on. So they don't want to
Right.
do anything. But you could be in the apartment building far enough away that you won't be harmed, that you could still call 911 and call the police and have them come out and break up the fight. You don't necessarily have to step in and do something. You could just call 911 on your phone and get the police there and get involved that way.
Right. That's at least something.
Right.
Yeah.
Now something I've heard over and over again is in martial arts training that, if you go into a knife fight, don't expect to not get cut.
Right.
Yeah.
You're going to get hurt. If you take on someone who's attacking someone, you're likely to get hurt. But does that matter?
Right. I think the idea of accepting it's going to be hard, but it's going to be worth it.
Right.
But yeah, that fear of rejection, fear of something bad happening to you as a result. Maybe even if you have a pattern of you put your head out there, you say something, and somebody's always slapping you down, you start to feel like there's nothing I can do. I'm not going to do any good here. Like, I guess in a way that goes back to the whole idea of maybe somebody else will handle it.
Mm-hmm.
But I get tired of getting getting hit on the head every time I pop it out.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that definitely is a deterrent. I certainly don't want to have that happen to me.
Right.
However, my integrity as a person might override that
Yeah.
feeling of avoidance, avoiding getting hurt or whatever, because someone else's life matters to
Yeah.
me.
So that whole idea of pushing past that and saying, but this person's worth it, resolving the situation's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to, like you were saying about integrity, I need to live with myself.
Right.
Am I willing to accept the consequences of my not standing up and saying something, doing something, making that phone call?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What if the person being attacked dies and you didn't do anything? You could have done something.
That's a tough regret to live with.
Yeah.
Mm.
So let's talk about intention. What is it? What do we mean when we say, we kind of briefly defined it, but we're going to get into some more specific information about intention. Anybody want to take the first thing?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is, as Evelyn was saying earlier, having a plan. But taking it a little bit further, if you are having an interaction with somebody and what they're doing is upsetting you, you set a boundary with that person, that's intentional, because you're telling them, don't do this thing, I don't like it. Even if it's not inherently wrong, if it's bothering you, setting a boundary is within your right to do, because you're intentionally saying, I don't like this. You're not just passively letting them do whatever they want.
Right. So intention is what you are going to do according to your values. You mentioned boundaries and your willingness to act.
Yeah.
Right. So your values are something you establish in life as to what's important to you. Right.
Right.
We kind of talked about that, I think, in our first episode. I think it was the one about saying no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe not the first one, but
Yeah,
it was the
early
episode
on.
about saying
Yeah.
no, because you have to know why you're saying no to
Yeah.
something. You have to have values, and those are based off of your personal convictions, your religious convictions, social convictions, familial, societal, etc. Those things are what hold you together and hold you to a standard of behavior.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
the boundaries we've also talked about, and this is what you're willing to let people do or not
Or
do.
not do. Yeah. As the case
or
may
what
be.
you're not willing to do.
Right.
Or whatever. And that is supported by your values. And then the last one we haven't really talked too much about is willingness to act. So what do we mean by that?
It's sort of like the difference between knowing something, like let's say going to a seminar about, I don't know, decluttering, for example, getting all kinds of ideas and then going home and continuing to live in a mess.
Right.
So it's that I'm going to do something differently. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to start to change the situation.
Yeah. So a few years ago, I was somewhere where there were a bunch of people, and I saw a man treating his girlfriend a specific way. And it was supposed to be a joke, but the way that the joke was being handled, the girl was being forced in a way to accept touch from another man. Now, it wasn't sexual, it was, but she obviously was uncomfortable with the idea and didn't want it. But didn't know how to say no. Right? And I just sat there and watched this. And I felt really upset about this interaction. Right?
Yeah.
And when the situation was over and a day or so later, I really thought about what happened, how I reacted to it, my unwillingness to act. And I decided at that moment, from now on, if I see anyone treating another person that way, I'm going to step in.
Yeah.
I can't live with myself if I don't.
Right.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what Rochelle was saying about having a plan of action. So if this happens again, this is what I'm going to do, and here's why.
Yeah. We hope that you're enjoying this episode. We want to remind you that we are also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, that we have a Patreon. You can go to our website and you can support us through Patreon, or you could just donate some money to us like you would buy us a cup of coffee if you want to, help us to keep doing what we're doing. Also, we are putting out various kinds of reels on various social media platforms that are meant to educate people on various aspects of self-defense or just different ways to think. If you're a fan of ours and you come across these reels, share them with people, because we want to get the message out there. And we rely on you, the listener, to spread the word. So take a moment, share it with a friend, share it on the platform you're on. We're on Facebook, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. And now back to our episode. So we're talking about intentionality or intention. We've talked about the problem of passivity, how we live in denial, we pass the buck, we live in a fantasy and avoid responsibility. We just talked about what intention is, that it's what you're willing to do or going to do according to your values, boundaries, and willingness to act. So now we're going to talk about the last piece, how to be intentional. Like, how do you even get there?
Right.
If you've been passive most of your life, how do you set yourself up for success in being intentional?
I feel like when you're passive, there's this sort of fogginess in your mind because you're not really paying attention to what's going on around you. At least that's been my experience. So kind of a level of unawareness. When you set intention, everything's clearer. You know what's going on. You're anticipating as you develop your skill on how to do that. And you're not just letting people walk all over you, or you're not just sort of out there in the ether somewhere in the fog. There's definitely something going on in your mind, and you are being intentional about what you want to do and how you want to handle it.
Right. So you mentioned setting your intentions. What do we mean by setting your intentions? Sort of going through the list of things that you value, what your boundaries are, what you're willing to do in different situations.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of a determining of, if this happens, this is what I'm going to do.
Right.
If this, then that. Yeah.
If then statements were really big when I was in high school in math.
Yep. I remember. Yeah, I remember that well. It's funny. I actually used to do that. This little disclosure about my brain. If I was in a class that was pretty easy in college, I would start to play situations in my head just to sort of, I don't know, keep my mind busy. And I would think, okay, if I was walking down to my car and I saw some movement in the bushes, what would I do? And I would just play these scenarios, and that's all well and good, but I don't recommend doing that in class. But you can do that anywhere. Anytime you're sitting in a doctor's office, for example, and you're waiting for the doctor to come.
Right.
If this happened, what would I do?
Yeah, that's definitely a way to set your intentions, to think about scenarios of things that could happen and like spend time thinking about how you could respond. As a matter of fact, our martial art organizational head, Ron Kosen Sensei, tells us to use our imagination to think about those things. Like, how would you respond if somebody suddenly appeared out of the bushes or pointed a gun in your face or threatened you in some way? How would you respond to that?
Right.
Yeah.
So one major feature of being intentional is a willingness to act now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not
Don't wait.
later, not tomorrow at 3 p.m.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe too late by then anyways.
It's probably too late by then anyway. Yeah.
I think that whole idea of just that take action now, no procrastination, just do it,
Right.
which can be pretty difficult for some of us, but beginning even small steps to just start building that discipline. I know in a recent episode, Rochelle was talking about laying down the neural pathways. I can start to move away from passivity and toward action, even in little things, just start the the consistent training in that.
Yeah. Consistency in training is a way to be intentional.
Right.
I mean, you can imagine all the ways you'd respond to somebody pointing a gun in your face, but if you don't know what to do about it, what good's that going to do you?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of controversy about how to handle people pointing guns and knives at you. I'm not saying there's one right way to do it, but I am saying that not knowing anything at all is just as bad as pretending that you know everything.
Yeah.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah, either extreme is going to put you in danger.
So spending time in a martial art context or self-defense context, learning how to move, learning how to breathe, learning how to, react to things. Because sometimes even just the emotional aspect is overwhelming by itself.
Yeah.
Just the freeze response. I don't know how many times I've heard people say, yeah, and I just froze. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything when this was happening to me.
Right.
Which is a normal response.
Right.
But the regret that comes with it is so heavy. It's such a heavy emotional price.
Yeah.
When you feel like I could have taken action, but I didn't know what to do, so I did nothing.
Right.
Such a regret. Yeah. So what else do you need in your pocket to, set your intentions or be intentional?
Deciding what your values and your boundaries are in any given situation. I think a quick review of your values and why you should act is important. And then deciding on what boundary you need to set or boundaries in order to be intentional about handling the situation well and not just letting it run over you.
Right. And you can have different boundaries for different situations.
Right. Yep.
Like you have general boundaries about certain things, how people treat you or whatever, but you can have specific boundaries about specific situations so that, like I said, if I ever saw someone treating a woman like I saw that one time, my intention is to intervene.
Right.
Now, would I intervene in every argument a man and woman has? Depends
Yeah.
on what's going on. If they're just yelling at each other, maybe not. But like that one time when we were leaving the dojo and that guy threw a bottle at the girl and I yelled at him.
Mm-hmm.
That's a moment where, because he was physical, where I felt like I needed to intervene.
Right.
Yeah, he had already gone over the line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What else? What else do we need, Evelyn?
I was thinking about that whole thing of as we're creating scenarios, what actions am I willing to take? What actions am I not willing to take? Mm-hmm. I think that sort of, comes with the values and the boundaries. But and then actually thinking about, I'm willing to do, well, kind of like what you just said, about I'm willing to maybe watch the situation with the man and the woman yelling, but I need to actually say something, maybe even call the cops, maybe even there may even need to be some sort of physical intervention. What would that look like? And actually using our imaginations to think that through.
Yeah, I think one of the really important parts of that is using wisdom to decide when to interact or when to when to act, but also being unwilling to compromise your values
Right.
for your own safety. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of things in the news where some stranger did something for some person who was in trouble to their own, like they got hurt too, but they both lived.
Right.
And it's often touted as this person that helped the other one was extraordinary in some way. And I guess to a degree that's true because people are so passive.
Yeah.
Right.
Because the passivity seems to be the norm.
Right.
Yeah.
But why not all of us become more like heroes? Let's make heroism normal.
Right.
Yeah.
I
So
agree.
the idea of something I'm unwilling to do is to allow passivity or denial or any of those negative things keep me from seeing what's going on and acting as may be appropriate. So I'm not willing to go back to being passive.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think also, being willing to act on your own behalf. So we've been talking about doing it for other people. What about for yourself?
Right.
Yeah.
If you're in a situation at your job where you're being treated a certain way that's clearly abusive, why let the boss or whoever's treating you that way get away with it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah. We're all worth protecting.
Yeah, worth protecting. I think, isn't that our first episode?
I
Yes.
think it is. You can find that episode and
Yeah.
listen to it. Get a refresher.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I think that's part of the value system. Am I worth protecting?
Right.
Are other people worth protecting?
Right.
And does that override whatever fear you have about getting involved?
And if it doesn't, what can I do to get to where I can override the fear and protect myself and protect others? Especially if I'm the one. If I look around and go, if I don't do something, it's not gonna be resolved.
Yeah.
And then, to be able to overcome whatever fear, or whatever the obstacle might be.
Right. Yeah. So I think we've reached our 30 minutes. Approximately. Yeah.
Time flies.
Yeah.
We're having fun.
I know every time we do an episode, I feel like we just started and now 30 minutes has passed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Goes really fast.
How did we talk about all this in 30 minutes? But here we are. So to review, we are talking about intention. We talked about the problem of passivity, what it is and how it affects you negatively. We talked about what intention is, that it's what you're willing to do based on your values and boundaries and willingness to act. And then how to be intentional is it comes around your willingness to know what you value, to set your boundaries, and to act when the time comes. I'd like to remind you that we are on Facebook, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, and TikTok. We're putting out 60 seconds or less videos with lots of good information. Please share those with your friends and family, and share this podcast. Like, if you've listened to this and you got something out of it, why not share it with a friend?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Let's spread the joy.
absolutely.
We certainly appreciate you listening to us talk and share what we think is important. And we look forward to being with you next time. Have a great one.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks so much for joining us as we discussed such an important topic. We hope you got some food for thought and encouragement to keep going and keep growing. See you later, Bear Club.
Remember to join the Bear Club on our Patreon page for exclusive content. The link is in the description. You can find our podcast on Google, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.